Well, good evening, folks. Here we are in 2022, beginning our 6 p.m. council meeting. So welcome to the regular meeting of the Common Council of the City of Platteville. And again, it's Tuesday, January 11th, 2022 at 6 p.m. And we're in the council chambers in Platteville, Wisconsin. We'll start tonight with roll call, Candace.
Lynn Parrott,
Here.
Isaac Shanley,
Here.
Barbara Doss,
Here.
Ken Killian,
Here.
Eileen Nichols, Kathy Kopp,
Here.
Jason Arts.
Here.
And before we begin our presentations and the rest of our agenda tonight, I would ask all of you to join me in a moment of silence for the firefighters that we lost this past week in Mineral Point. Thank you. And a special thank you to our volunteers and the work they do on our behalf every day of the week. Sorry, guys. Now we'll move on to the rest of the agenda. So the first thing we have is a presentation recognizing 37 years of service to the city of Platteville. So Jenny. Hey folks, this is Jennifer Schmidt. She's worked for us for 37 years. So this is in recognition of her 37-year outstanding service and dedication to the city of Platteville. Whereas Jennifer Schmidt has faithfully served the city of Platteville since 1985 and has a positive impact on the careers of many officers, telecommunicators, and community officers. And whereas Jennifer was integrally involved with answering 911 calls, service dispatching, the administration of the city's parking program, and processing records requests for many years. And whereas Jennifer has loyally served and has been a calm voice on the phone and the radio during countless emergencies, large and small. And whereas Jennifer has embodied the spirit of public service in faithfully, diligently, and honestly executing her duties during the stressful times at all. And whereas Jennifer was the longstanding union steward on behalf of the Teamsters Union representing telecommunicators and assisted with negotiating numerous contracts between the city and whereas Jennifer's professional talents have contributed to making the Platteville community a better place to live, work, and play. Now there, I-4 Barb Dawes, Common Council President of the City of Platteville, on behalf of the Common Council and city employees, both past and present, do hereby wish to express our sincere appreciation to Jennifer for her dedication and congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, the first item on our agenda then is consideration of the consent calendar. The following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature or previous discussion. Please indicate if you prefer separate discussion or action. First, we have the council minutes from December 14th. We have payment of bills. We have the financial report for December. Appointments to boards and commissions. Tonight, I am reconfirming and appointing 5 members to the Broski Center Care Committee. Cindy Tang will be the Parks, Forestry, and Recreation Committee rep. Kathy Kopp is our council rep. Dimitri Andrew from the school district will serve, as will Sherry Engelke, who was the project manager on the Broski, and Beth Kaiser. So those are the first 5. I have invitations out to several others, and we'll hope to make those appointments at our next meeting. We also have licenses, change of agent for Class B combination beer and alcohol license for down at the Boondocks to Brandon Weigel. 1 and 2 year operator licenses to sell and serve alcohol, a taxi driver license, the banner permit for the Platteville Fire Department's annual pancake breakfast fundraiser on that will hang from March 21 to March 11. And Ryan, the actual pancake breakfast is on.
Actual breakfast is on Palm Sunday, April 10th at the high school from 7 a.m. to 12:30.
Thank you. And let's see. A resolution 2201 authorizing participation in the opioid litigation. Do I hear a motion?
Or I would like to pull the resolution 2201 separately to ask a couple questions. Is that okay?
Sure, you can either, sure. All right, so are you making a motion to approve A through F?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Kathy, seconded by Lynn to approve the consideration calendar items A through F. Candace will vote.
Parrot. Yes. Shanley,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols, Cop,
Yes.
Arts.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, Kathy, resolution 2201. Questions?
Yes. I'd just like to have a little more explanation of exactly what this is, like what kind of costs? I mean, how is that coming back to the city?
Yeah, good,
What-
very good question. So we were approached, actually, our municipal attorney, so Bill Cole, who is the city's municipal attorney, was approached by a firm that is basically doing a class action lawsuit for the state of Wisconsin in relation to opioid abuse and overuse. So what they are doing is essentially looking at potentially going after insurance companies for costs that municipalities have had to incur with obviously training that has to be done, any type of additional services that municipalities have had to provide or increases. So what is going on here is it's a class action lawsuit. So to answer your question about costs, we are not charged anything to be a part of this. They only receive compensation essentially if they win the lawsuit. And then what happens is, typically with class action lawsuits, it can end up either nothing happens or it's a settlement where a bunch of money is put in and then it's divvied out throughout multiple kind of municipalities and organizations. So potentially there would be something that could be given back to the city. And if that would happen, then obviously we would have to have discussions as a council in regards to what you would like done with that. It would either go directly to the police department or it could be utilized for something else. But as it kind of indicates in the notes, as far as fees, they are only paid essentially if they win. There's no cost to the city to be a part of this.
Thank you.
Okay, do you have action then to propose on resolution 2201?
I move to approve 2201.
Okay, motion by Ken, seconded by Eileen to approve resolution 2201. Candace will vote.
Parrot,
Yes.
Shanley,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols, Cop,
Yes.
Arts.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we're at the place of citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any. And I've had nobody registered to speak tonight. I would, however, like to give a shout out to one of our Boy Scouts who are in the audience tonight, probably for a observing a government meeting or whatever, for maybe a badge. So thank you for coming, and make sure and ask any questions at the end of the meeting that you'd like. Okay, going on then to reports. There were there are lots of minutes and reports in your packets. Board of Appeals zoning, Isaac.
Nothing to add.
The Freudenreich Animal Care Trust Board, Lynn. Housing Authority, several minutes, Ken, from September, October, November, and December.
We have no additions,
Okay, Water and Sewer,
no additions on
no
my part.
additions. Police and Fire,
Nothing to add.
Airport Commission,
Nothing to add.
Parks, Recreation and Forestry, Jason.
Just that we are in the process of reviewing resumes and applications, and hopefully we'll have a new director soon.
Good. Museum Board, Eileen.
I would just like everyone to check the museum website and the lyceums, which are held in the this time of the year, every year, are already planned, and the first one will be in February. They are full, so you can sign up, but please do sign up so that you can get the Zoom connection. And again, the first one's in February. Check the website.
Okay, and the Historic Preservation Commission, Ken.
No addition.
Okay, there were other reports in your packet, the Water and Sewer Financial Report, the Airport Financial Report, and Department Progress Reports. And Ken, you had a question on one of the Department Progress Reports.
Yes, I hope you can hear me all right. Otherwise, I'll take this thing off.
You're doing okay.
What?
You're okay.
Okay, it's about Department of Public Works under 2021 projects. And it's a Business Highway 151, the Safety Improvement Program. And it says on the third line that the contractor has completed the work from Staley to Water. So I have a question or two on this. At this time, is Staley crosswalk, is that in use, and all of the necessary things have been put up as far as signs, whatever, for the Staley Avenue crossing?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Then my question is, as far as completion of work, why wasn't on the north side, I'm only going to ask about the north side, why wasn't the last drainage spot covered with something as far as protection? What I'm asking about is the drainage that is coming from Harrison Park and all the things that drain into the Harrison Park tile drainage there too. So why was that not a part of this program, or is it a part? Why I'm asking it is because of the fact that people walk down the end of Court, and so they may be walking by that particular spot, which is basically a deep hole with a pipe in it, and it's maybe 4.5, 5 feet deep, so somebody could fall into that. So that's the basic question. Why wasn't that covered? Why wasn't that anything done with it? Because this was done to other places down the street going to Staley.
Is this down on 150, on Business 151?
I understand where he's talking about. There's an inlet on the north side there between the Pizza Hut and the hillside. There's a driveway there. It was not considered as part of the project. Now, if we need to come back later and do something else there, it's been like that, and I just don't, if there's a safety concern for that, we'll have to look at that separately, but that was not part of the project.
So whose decision was it not to include it?
I would imagine that's,
Was that a decision of the DOT? Did they make the decision? Who made that decision? Well, let me
there was
explain.
no conscious decision to do anything or not do anything with that. I mean, there wasn't a conscious decision to not do it. It just wasn't considered.
Okay, I'm bringing it up because there are people walking down the end of South Court. There are people walking up South Court. And so those people, are they coming from Staley Crossing? Are they crossing business 151? So that's an issue, because if they're coming from Staley, then they're walking close to the highway. And the question is, would they be walking out farther away? So one issue is the closeness of people walking to that area, to that particular spot that is not covered. And the other thing is, I have a question on people are going to work. I know at least one that works across 151. And does that person have to cross at Staley, or is that person crossing jaywalking? So will jaywalkers be ticketed for crossing? And also, sometimes at night, people come back and they're walking up South Court Street. And did they jaywalk, or where did they come from? If they came from Staley, they're walking likely close to this spot that is, I consider it a hazard. So that's my basic question. I believe it to be a hazard because you move the road closer to that area. It's also a hazard in that now we run our mowers closer to this area, and that could be a problem too. I don't want to take too much time, but that's to me an issue. I believe it to be unsafe. Thank you.
Look at that and send a report up.
Well, it's probably covered partly with snow. And also another thing is that at that driveway, just before you go up the hill, the contractor has left a ditch about 1.5 feet wide. And in previous years, the city employees have mowed that area. And I don't know how they're going to mow this area that's only 1.5 feet wide. So I don't think the job is done as far as that driveway. So that's another issue. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll maybe hear about that a little bit more after the snow flies and we
Now where
can,
to go.
okay, when we can see it again.
But I wanted to bring it up.
Okay. Any other questions on the department progress reports? Then we'll move on along to our action items. The first of those is Resolution 2202, authorizing execution of the Department of Natural Resources principal execution of the Department of Natural Resources principal forgiveness financial assistance agreement. Howard.
Yes. Thank you. What's happening is a few years back, we were part of the initial lead service line program with the Department of Natural Resources. Technically, what this is a loan program, but it's a carve out that says that the principal of the loan is being forgiven. In other words, it's a grant. So, but that's just the way that they have to term this, that it's a loan. And if you follow the rules, then they forgive you the principal repayment. So it becomes a grant. We successfully received grants in 2017 and 18. And those were multi-year grants. 2021 was the first of what they consider single calendar year grants. So every calendar year from 2021 forward, we will need to provide put in a new packet. And so that's what we're doing here is I'm preparing the packet. And one of the items is this resolution authorizing certain members to execute those documents.
Okay, questions on Resolution 2201, dealing with lead service line replacement and applying for monies for that program.
That's a good idea. Any idea how many So these lines are left to do.
In the,
We were up to 500, weren't we?
we're actually up over 600
600.
all. But the current counts are in the project update from that was earlier in the packet. So we right now have 137 known lead service lines remaining.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I would take a motion.
Resolution 2202.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve resolution 2202, authorizing us to execute these documents. Candace will vote.
Parrot,
Yes.
Shanley,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols, Cop,
Yes.
Arts.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next on our action agenda are the 2022 city goals. Adam.
Yes, good evening. So welcome to 2022, and this is one of the reasons why we have the 2022 city goals. So every year, we essentially bring kind of the goals in front of the council that have been established either through the strategic planning process that we've done in years past, as well as some specific department head initiatives that we are looking for. And what we are looking for tonight is essentially just a motion by the council to adopt the goals that we have here. This is obviously not an all-inclusive list, so if there's things that get added, we certainly can bring it in here. But the point is, what we like to do with this then is every quarter in 2022, we will be bringing kind of status updates for you on kind of where things are currently at in regards to these goals. But they are directly kind of in, as we talked about, in continuation with our strategic plan. So they hit the particular 3 values that we're looking at doing, which is the safe, welcoming, and engaged community, thoughtful development and prosperous economy, and quality infrastructure, amenities, and services. So if you adopt these tonight, essentially what we'll be doing then at our staff meeting is starting to look at prioritizing these and going forward with moving forward with these. So what we're looking for tonight is a motion to basically adopt the 2022 City of Platteville City Goals.
Questions, comments?
comment.
Yeah, questions or comments or a motion?
I have a question.
Fire away.
Under quality infrastructure, amenities and services,
Yes.
can you give any report or update as far as this first item, community center? Our last meeting, we looked at the armory as something that might be purchased by the city. So do you have any thoughts as far as any progress as to what is happening to that situation as far as the armory?
Yeah, so we're continuing. Obviously, I'm working with the Department of Military Affairs in regards to they're looking to put the armory up for sale. I've been contacted by a couple of individuals who are potentially interested. So this week, actually, I was just contacted yesterday by somebody who is interested. So I'm going to be reaching out to the Department of Military Affairs real estate contact that I've been working with to kind of start that process. What this particular is last year we had a lot of kind of preliminary conversations between the school district, the YMCA, and the city about looking at some long-term solutions for a recreation space. The school district is definitely moving forward with that potential plan. So we have been kind of partnering with them and looking into ideas. I also am going to be working with the YMCA. There's been some childcare discussions that we've had with them about potentially looking at kind of a community center space as well. So those are some future conversations we plan to have as staff, as well as bringing the council in with that with Southwest Health, because they are working on a potential grant for childcare as well, or have been looking at that option as well. So it's all kind of inclusive. Yes, we'll potentially, be looking at possible businesses that would be interested in using the armory as a community center. So those are all things that we're going to kind of continue to kick the fires on in 2022.
It used to be a community center for City of Platteville about 1941.
That's what I heard.
So it's a historic building.
Sure.
So I was curious. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or do I hear a motion?
I move to adopt the 2022 City of Platteville City Goals.
Second to the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt the 2022 city goals as presented. Candace will vote.
Parrot,
Yes.
Shanley,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols, Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, that ends the action portion of our agenda tonight. We'll move on now to items on information and discussion. The first of this is Rundy Chevrolet driveway. And I believe, Howard, this will probably be you,
Sure.
although I can't get it to go there.
That's fine. Just to recap, we received a Highway Safety Improvement Program grant to improve safety on Business 151. Due to a recorded fatal crash involving a bicyclist, it was decided that we needed to install a shared use bike pedestrian pathway from the Novus driveway where it connects with the Roundtree Branch Trail up to the trail at East Side Road. The east driveway into the Rundy Chevrolet display lot was constructed a few years ago. It was steep, but able to accommodate car carriers. To comply with ADA standards, the trail cannot have more than a 2% cross slope. This resulted in a design where there's a flat spot basically for this trail. Based on this, car carriers cannot enter that lot without getting stuck or dragging due to that flat spot. Prior to purchasing this display lot, car carriers came in the driveway between Rundy and Honeywell. Even with the new lot, the managers at Rundy Chevrolet say that car carriers cannot negotiate the lot in front of the building, turn around and come back out. They would have to go out, they would have to offload in front of the other property. DOT does not consider driveways to be a project cost. It is up to a private property owner or the city to fund any corrections to the driveway if they are needed. We had notice of public information meetings and the opportunity for feedback. Pioneer Ford provided that feedback. City agreed to fund approximately $40,000 to lower both of their driveways, and they granted a construction easement to allow us to grade onto their private property to make the transition less steep. One thing that's not in here that I want to point out is that the design as it is right now for the Pioneer Ford driveways, car carriers will potentially scrape a little bit on that driveway. That was a decision and choice that was made in consultation with Pioneer Ford. We provided basically 3 designs for them. One was the original DOT design. The other was a design similar to the one that we have here for the Rundys that would extend into the Pioneer Ford parking area. And then there was what we would consider a compromise where it only went up to the edge of their parking lot. And in consultation with them, we decided to use that one because they wanted to keep the parking area as it is. And so everybody understood and agreed that there could be some scraping on that. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the work that's happening for Pioneer Ford, if somebody comes up a year or 2 years from now and says, well, the car carrier scrapes a little, unfortunately, that's going to be the case. I don't want there to be any mistakes or misunderstandings about that. But that was in consultation with the owners of Pioneer Ford. Now, getting back to this driveway, in order to do a design that would make sure that car carriers do not get stuck, do not scrape, it would include impacting the display parking lot so that the transition for the driveway goes 30 or 40 feet back into the lot. Now, Delta 3 has done a more detailed estimate and detailed drawing for a gradual transition up into the parking area. And the estimate is roughly $160,000 to do the work as proposed in the drawings. I had a phone call with managers at Runby Chevrolet, and they have agreed to proceed with the proposed plans. There were some questions by Alderperson Shanley, and that email thread is attached in the packet. And so there are multiple options, and so staff is asking for guidance. Yes, Ken.
Ken.
I'd like to go back. I'm not too familiar with this. But as far as what's out there in the way of concrete put in, you right now have something put in which does not meet the requirements as far as Rundy's, the car carriers, correct?
Correct.
And was that built by means of the DOT making a design?
Correct.
So they made the design, and then we had a contractor come in and pour the concrete. And then after that, it was learned that this was not the correct design.
It was
Is that correct?
not, the design was not suitable for the purposes that they're using it, that they want to use it.
But as far
It's
as,
not what I would
but as far
consider
as the
correct.
car carrier, whoever designed that should have had that in mind, that car carriers have various lengths, certain lengths, and instead of taking it into account and making that design, and also the contractor carrying out that project. So to me, I look at it that really is Rundy the one that's the fault here, or is it the design people or persons that came up with this design and put in the concrete? We're going backwards. And I don't believe that they should be completely the scapegoat on this sort of thing, because we would expect somebody that's has a auto business and uses car carriers, that a design would be looked at, would work for car carriers, and that should have been thought through. That's my opinion, what I see on this job. And as far as what I saw out there over a period of years, often you could see car carriers parked along the road. So you knew they had to be going in now with this new pedestrian pathway, they'd have to be going in to get off the road. Is that correct? You can't leave and park along the road now.
That would be correct. Yeah,
You can't leave and park along the road like you did before.
well,
So, I know that's what I think about it. I think there's a matter of incorrect design here, and then the work is done, and now we're going in and trying to fix the work. And who's paying for that concrete? What is the city cost so far as this work? Is this work all city costs? As far as
what has been done so far for their driveway has been a part of the base contract for that the DOT put out, and that would be part of that 90-10.
that they would pay for?
90% DOT.
90%.
Yes,
And then the city is picking up still in costs about $800,000. Is that correct?
well, that's for the entire,
That's the entire thing. But part of it is this work along the highway.
yeah, I mean,
Or it's the trail, not the driveway.
the trail, yes.
It's the trail, not the driveway. There were driveways there, so if,
But the driveway is paid by whom? the DOT would pay 90% of it?
They pay 90% of the design as it is right now, not any future design,
So,
not any
but if
changes to the
the
design.
design is not correct, then they should 90% of the cost in the future to do this because it's incorrect.
The DOT does not consider it an incorrect design, and it is a property owner's driveway. And so DOT leaves it to the property owner to do any, to provide any necessary driveway adjustments. DOT will not fund any changes to the way that it's currently designed.
Even though it's incorrectly designed.
Correct is your opinion, not the DOT's opinion.
Okay, other questions, comments?
So prior to the project, had Rundy been using that driveway for car carriers?
Based on what I've understood from the managers, yes.
Now they're not gonna be able to use it because of the scratching or the damage that'll come to vehicles that come through there.
The truck can't get up the driveway.
Truck can't get up, and the truck used to come up that way.
Yeah.
So they have, is that correct?
That's what they're saying, yes.
Okay, Isaac had asked for information about how landowners along there were advised of this project. So would you like to review that with us, Howard?
This project was initially conceived back in 2018. There was an initial presentation to the Common Council on August 14th, 2018. 10 days later, letters went out to owners inviting them to an open house at the library. We held the open house in the community room, 6 p.m. on September the 12th, 2018. There was Common Council action at a meeting on September 25th. Due to input from that community room meeting, there were scope changes that were identified, not in relation to this. We had a meeting for owners impacted by those changes. And then on May 28th, 2019, council approved a scope amendment. There was a public information meeting on January 21st, 2020 at 10 a.m. And then it talks about, then there was a public information meeting held at Wisconsin Bank and Trust on July 19th, 2021 with the contractor to discuss the tentative schedule and make final adjustments. There was a second public information meeting held on August 9th at the Chamber of Commerce. And it was decided at that meeting, based on the lack of responses or representation, that that we would forego additional public information meetings. We have talked about having another meeting coming up this spring prior to work restarting.
Howard, if I'm looking at this right, there's 4 opportunities to Rundy's to speak on this project before it started. You'd have 9/12, 1/21, 7/19, and 8/9.
True, yes.
And was it one of those meetings that Pioneer Ford spoke?
That's correct, yes. The January 2020 meeting.
I'm guessing they could have also potentially attended the common council presentations as well. I think there's a couple of common council.
Add that to the floor. Yep.
I have a question. Was there any engagement or any communication from Rundy during this whole planning process? Or has the only communication come now recently after the work has been done?
There was no direct communication either by us directly to them or by them directly back to us until after the work was being done.
So what you're doing here is to blame the victim of a poor design.
I don't know if I agree with that, because there was another business that engaged in the process and was able to come out with a design and took responsibility.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Jason. That's what these public meetings were for, is so that, and what's it, this particular case, a person that was in the auto business knows what these delivery trucks are like.
Car carrier.
But car carriers are like, that's what these public meetings are for, is to not so much object to a plan, but to work with the DOT or the designer to see if there's another outcome that could, accommodate both the DOT's plans as well as the property owners. So I wouldn't say it's a victim. I think it's maybe a lack of
Participation.
participation and going to the meetings. You see all over in the area. Again, that's what these meetings are for. It's not the DOT just stating that this is how it's going to be. It's they're forward. Do you have any questions, objections, alternatives they could bring forward? So I kind of say that I'd ask a question at the last council meeting on this is, who designed this? Because although the DOT states that they're not responsible for the driveway purposes, it's the DOT's design on here. So I'm not seeing why the city would be responsible for paying for something that we had no design on, or say on the design.
I'll go back to my original point. I expect that DOT would have correctly designed it.
Well, I agree with you on that. So, but if
But
somebody doesn't show
to
up,
say, well, they didn't come to the meetings.
but if
Now, if somebody put in a sidewalk outside my house, I'd expect to design it correctly or put in a street.
But if the property owners don't go to the meetings to state what that driveway purpose is for, the DOT is not going to assume, which is the correct word, of what that, they could assume 100 uses for that driveway. So, they needed guidance and direction as to what that usage was for.
And as I look at it, they didn't know how to do it correctly. I do have a question. Could the car carriers be unloaded somewhere else in the city of Platteville?
So there is a representative from Rundy here. If you want to come to the microphone and answer that question. You have to have your
Locations that you could
name and
stop at
address first.
unload your vehicles and drive them to your business, because I know of a lot of people that drive cars miles and take them to a business. That's part of their job.
Start with my name.
Name.
Eric Schmidt, 1560 Cornerstone Circle, Platteville. The answer would be no. We have to physically inspect every car that comes off the car carrier while it's there. If we don't notice any damage while it's there, we have basically, you have that time to look at the car, sign off on it. So I need an employee or two to walk around each vehicle that's unloaded. If we don't notice them, there's a scuff on a car and it's covered in salt, it's on us then if we don't get it there. So it's kind of a process when vehicles get unloaded and how we handle it.
Question is, why can't you do that at another location?
That would be a major inconvenience for us to send somebody there. A truck driver calls, we don't know when they're coming. And to send somebody off site to go look at vehicles, and then we have to get the vehicles back to the lot, that would just not be not be something that would be doable.
And Eric, you have been with Rundy Chevrolet throughout this process?
Yeah, yep.
So, and prior to, I mean, can you tell us locations where Rundy has offloaded cars?
Other than,
Locations wherever you have offloaded cars for Rundy Chevrolet and Platteville.
that's the only place we've offloaded cars is either on the lot or they used to offload cars occasionally in the shoulder.
And you offloaded this week some trucks,
Yes,
and those were offloaded where?
Honeywell.
At
They'll pull
Honeywell.
into Honeywell straight in
Oh,
the lot and then they can unload there.
Anybody have any other questions?
That was gonna have to happen if this doesn't get altered. You're gonna have to go into this plan for you all.
Well,
We don't.
I mean, basically, we had put that lot in there, for additional, display and for another access. It works good for the vehicles to be able to, come in that way. It's big and open in the back. Generally, that's where the car should be unloaded. So that's why we had put it in, and I know you guys say you didn't go to the meetings and whatever. We're not engineers. We would trust that the plan was correct, from the DOT or whoever designed it. This isn't something you could see from our eyes in a plan until you see the finished project. So until it's paved, but basically all we're asking is we put it in for a purpose and now we can't use it for that. And it's not just transports that are going to have an issue with it. I mean, take this summer, go drive a Camaro up it or drive any low car or a longer van. I mean, it's not going to work. So we're not asking for, we just want how we had it, we want it to work for what we designed it for.
Do you have plans from the original design?
I should, yeah. The company that, I don't know if they just managed the project for you guys or the DOT, Beasing and Associates.
Using.
Beasing, they designed the original. They were he designed, I think he did the whole parking lot project, but I know he for sure did that part.
That's even more interesting. At the last meeting, I think when we talked about this, we suggested that you go back and talk to your engineers about what would work and come forward with your plan.
They had just asked if we're okay working with Delta 3 on the plan that Dan had come up with.
So are you saying you're going to employ Dan to Delta 3 for a design?
Howard wanted to know if we were okay working with Delta 3 on the project, which we said yes. On the design that Dan came up with.
Okay, this is not on our agenda for action tonight. Do you have any guidance you want to give to the staff relative to any additional information or?
So I think what I'm hearing is obviously with Rundy's intention to use Dan's, the information that was created by Delta 3, then what we would be doing then is any costs that were associated for creating that would obviously then, be given to Rundy's because that was the city's intention. But now if it's, if the intention is essentially to use the same plans that the city put together, we can have further conversations about that in regards to a cost sharing or what that is. But that's kind of the next step we need to know as staff is what, as a direction for us as staff, where do you want us to go? Is this something where you want us to continue to look into this? Obviously there was some information tonight that, their original design was done by Beasings. That might be a conversation if that's something where you want to direct us to have them come in front of you. Obviously you as the council, those are some of the things we're kind of to look at as to regards to what are the next steps you would like us to do as city staff in regards to this matter.
I think at the last meeting, the recommendation was the Rundies was to contact their engineers for this to see if maybe they had an alternative plan than what Delta 3 had. Because obviously Delta 3 is very good at what they do, but you know, another engineer might have another recommendation is we could possibly do this, or this may work. So that's what I was anticipating was another set of eyes to this.
And at present, this is $160,000 project estimate.
Correct.
That was incorrectly reported in the newspaper as 60,000. It's actually 160,000, which, as I pointed out last time, is about a 4% tax raise for the city taxpayer. 1% tax raise, it yields about, I guess it's a little less than 4. 1% increase in taxes yields about $45,000. So what we're considering is adding 3.5% to the tax of everyone in town. Anybody have any other, this is not on for action?
No, so it's up to you as the council. If you want this to be brought for action, it'll be brought as action, or if you want there to be continuing conversations, it'll obviously be brought back as information and discussion. So
I would actually like to have you have a discussion with Busing. Because I'm curious, did they do the design for Pioneer Ford as well?
No.
No, this Busing did the original design. I would like to
That,
see,
but I'm,
I mean, I'd like to see the original design as it relates to the current design.
but I'd like to see the connection, if there is one, between the two properties.
Connection. There wouldn't be, there is, I mean, there's a
I'm just
common
saying,
lot
if
line.
there, my question is, the DOT. So was it Busing that made the change for Pioneer Ford?
No.
Who did that design?
No.
The change?
DOT did.
They,
didn't-
The
DOT hired,
did?
DOT hired, at that time, it was IIW. They've changed their name, but IIW engineers were the ones who did the Business 151 DOT design project. Okay. Beasing was hired by DOT to be their on-site representative only. So IIW did the design, they handed it off to DOT, who then handed it to Beasing to be on site to monitor the project as it was being done. From what I'm hearing, Beasing was hired however many years ago that was, that did the design for the original display lot. So it's 2 or 3 different things.
yeah, so I think any information we can get from Rundy's in regards to who you guys worked with originally from Beasing's would probably,
Or the construction.
or the
drawing.
construction plans, if you can get those to
Yeah.
Howard, we can kind of,
We would have those still.
But I will go back to the fact that there were numerous public meetings and other property owners came and expressed concerns and wanted to know how this was going to affect their property. And, you know, I guess for me, you know, I don't know how I would know what this driveway was going to be used for unless a property owner told me what it was going to be used for.
I think they could assume, but like I say, I feel like we get pointed at for not going to this meeting. You wouldn't see this on a plan, or somebody would have fixed it. It's not that it just doesn't work for a transport. Take a low car out there and go drive up it once and see how it feels. We're not, and you know, we're just asking for it to be corrected. You know, we want it back to how we had it designed, paid for it to be done. That's all we're asking for.
Okay, I think you've heard what we need, so I guess we'll move on to the next agenda item. Which is kennel relocation proposal request.
Yes, so during Tuesday's December 14th, 2021 Common Council meeting, the council made the determination to deny the conditional use permit for a business kennel at the property located at 345 Bailey Avenue. I was contacted via email directly after the decision by the property owner, Mr. Daniel Lynch, who is in attendance tonight, about how he would not be able to comply starting on January 1st, 2022, and asked for suggestions. After meeting with Bill Cole, the city's municipal attorney, an email reply was sent to Mr. Winch on Friday, December 17th, 2021, indicating the following. Due to the Common Council's decision to deny his kennel license, his ability to operate a private kennel would expire on December 31st, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. If he wishes to operate a business kennel in the city of Platteville, the suggestion was given to talk with an architectural or engineering firm to determine if a location within the Platteville Industry Park would be suitable to meet the requirements within the city of Platteville's municipal code and his business plan. Any plans obviously then would need to be reviewed and discussed further by city staff and the City of Platteville Plan Commission. Per the City of Platteville's municipal code, Chapter 6, animals, a property owner within the city of Platteville who does not have a private or business kennel license is not allowed to keep, harbor, or maintain more than 4 dogs over the age of 5 months in one location. After conferring with city staff and legal counsel, I was authorized to give an extension for him to gain compliance with Chapter 6 by January 31st, 2022. I received a response from Mr. Winch on Friday, December 17th at 4:03 p.m. indicating thanks for the extension, but indicating concerns it would not help in gaining compliance. In his email, he expressed that he had a litter due January 26th and will be at his location for at least 8 weeks. They had reviewed locations within the industrial park and outside of the city, but nothing would be able to be achieved by the deadline of January 31st, 2022. Mr. Winch then requested the Plan Commission should consider a proposal for an extension and asked how such a proposal would be heard. On Monday, December 20th, I responded to Mr. Winch indicating the appropriate body to consider any form of a proposal or request would be the Common Council. I expressed I would need to receive any request by Tuesday, January 4th, 2022 for the proposal to be considered by the Common Council at the Tuesday, January 11th meeting. On Tuesday, January 4th, City Clerk Klaus and I did formally receive via email the attached kennel license proposal for Mr. Winch. Mr. Winch indicated in his email he plans to be in attendance to discuss his proposal further with the council. So as far as budget and fiscal impacts go into this, per Mr. Winch's attached proposal, he has requested the city of Platteville consider 2 proposals to provide him with financial assistance. I'll let him in a minute here kind of go through the proposals and everything that he put together, but the proposals do range in financial assistance anywhere between $725,000 to $3.2 million. If the council wishes to proceed with consideration of providing financial assistance, city staff will be able to prepare further budgetary financial analysis at a future meeting. I was asked by a council member to look into just kind of a rough estimate of potentially what that would mean. So what I was able to prepare is kind of looking at potentially if the city were to go out and borrow $3 million, that typically would be done by some form of a bank loan. Generally, if you look at a 15-year term for a bank loan for $3 million, you are looking at principal payments of about $200,000 each year. And then obviously interest that would be applied. So what it would roughly come out to is in the first year, you're looking at about $294,250 that would need to be paid to satisfy the loan. And then in each subsequent year, it obviously becomes less, with the last year being about a $203,250 payment. So what this means is that particularly it would have an increase to the tax rate of potentially 52 cents for the first year, and then escalating down every year to being a 36-cent increase. That roughly alone, just on this particular proposal, would be about a 6.26% increase in the tax rate for residents and citizens every year. And then the last year would be about 4.32%. So again, this is a very bare bones estimate. So if the decision made by the council would be to look into further financial assistance, we obviously would definitely tighten the belt a little bit and look at every possible scenario in order to make that happen. So obviously some of the things that we're looking for tonight, or I'm looking for as the city manager, is number one, I'm unable to grant any further extension for Mr. Winch to gain compliance without council approval. So some of the things we're obviously looking for are number one, does the council wish to extend Mr. Winch's ability to come into compliance with the City of Platteville Municipal Code? As indicated, the current deadline to gain compliance expires Monday, January 31st at 11:59 p.m. If an extension is not granted, then essentially I have to direct staff to conduct enforcement compliance procedures starting on February 1st. Number two, does the council wish to direct staff to move forward with researching either proposal submitted by Mr. Winch? If the council does wish to move forward, then direction is needed on if you wish for this to return as an action item or continue as information and discussion, or does the council wish to direct staff in a different direction? So I think at this point in time, it would make sense to allow Mr. Winch to kind of come up and talk about the proposal that he submitted to you, so you can kind of hear what he is requesting.
As you all know, my name is Dan Winch, 345 Bailey Avenue, Platteville, Wisconsin. Real briefly, yeah, back in 2020, the laws were changed such that now we would not be in compliance in this 2022. There was a provision added that the Common Council could extend that, and as we all remember, that was not extended. So as it stands, we as Adam mentioned, would not be in compliance now starting January 31st. And what that would mean, according to city staff, is that starting February 2nd, a $260 a day fee would be charged to us until such time as we lose our home and my daughter and family and I are out on the street. So that's obviously not a good solution. So let's talk about some solutions that might work. So we do have some land that we purchased. That's my first proposal, and quite frankly, I think it's the best proposal for going forward with the city of Platteville. I don't have formal plans made up yet. They would cost a little bit to go make, and based on the city's decision, I can certainly go have those made and we can, dig into it more. But if the city is not going to help us out with this, then it wouldn't be feasible anyway, and that would just be wasted money. So I think we need to, think about what we're going to do before we go do it. But that being said, I did reach out to a few firms locally to see what a rough estimate would cost. Eastman Cartwright here in Platteville thought that it would cost roughly $2 million. The other was Epic Construction. They do primarily commercial, and they said that they wouldn't be one to build it themselves anyway, but that it would roughly be somewhere between I believe I said I did the math on it here. 2.6 or 2.6 to 3.2 million is what they estimated. I also reached out to Delta 3, and I think that their estimate was based on it being a commercial building, which it wouldn't necessarily need to be. It wouldn't need that state licensure stuff because it would be all in the one building. And I reached out to the building inspector to find this information out as well. Their estimate for just the kennel itself was 1.3 million. Now, that's obviously probably not the best, and so I didn't include it in this, but somewhere between 2 million and 3.2 million is what the cost is going to be to go build this thing. Now, what I am proposing is that I would get bank funding to pitch in on this. I believe I could get bank funding for about 500,000, and then we could collaboratively get the funding to do this. So that would change Adam's numbers over there. Potentially, if we can get it down to the 2 million, it would just be the 1.5 million at that point if it's on the low end, and we pitch in as well, which would roughly cut those numbers in half that Adam just mentioned. So I think this is the best proposal for the city of Platteville. Not only does it not make my family homeless, but it also provides a local place for people to board their dogs, and we are able to continue doing what we are doing at that point. Now, no matter what we do here, right, we're not going to be able to build a house between now and the end of January, besides the fact that it's winter. So that's not going to help us to go build. But if we were to, our two options at this point are either buy somewhere else or build somewhere else, right? That's really what we've got. if we cannot continue doing what we're doing where we're doing it. So looking at what's available on the market, there is nothing in the Platteville School District right now that would be suitable for this type of thing. Now, if you're looking at outside of the city of Platteville, there are certain, each municipality and each district, each county, everyone has different rules on what you can do for breeding, boarding, how many dogs, how many offsets, the feet of offset. So outside of, inside of the city of Platteville School District, there's nothing available currently that we could go purchase. Even if there were, and even if it were reasonably priced, we wouldn't be able to close on it by January 31st anyway. So there's no way that we would be able to be in compliance on February 1st, no matter what. Which, if there's no ethical way for us to be in compliance and the law is written like that, that does make it unenforceable. But that's a different topic. So that's number one, is let's go talk about building on our property just outside of Platteville. And I do think that's a great solution. I quite frankly would like to stay where I am, but that is the next best option for everyone. Option number two is, since there is no place inside the city of inside of the school district of Platteville where we could purchase and move into right away, looking at other places far away. Now, obviously, that's gonna ruin any repeat boarding that we might have, and it also would move us away from friends and family, potentially, depending on where we're going. So it's less than ideal, okay? And as such, I am not willing to pitch in on this because this changes what we were intending on doing. This is not what we're looking to do, but in order to become in compliance, it is also an option. And I did post a few pictures in the packet of a few places that I found that are options. They range in price from $725,000 up to $2.2 million. Now, I did a rough research into each of these places, and it appears that they would be suitable. But I have to, if the city of Platteville is, amenable toward purchasing a property and then, selling it to us for $1, we could certainly go and make sure that these properties, whatever property we choose, would be suitable for what we're trying to do, because you'd be surprised how many properties are not suitable, and different counties have different rules, and it's a big thing to jump through to find one that is suitable. So that is option number two. And I guess, yeah, that's my request to the city is, no matter what, if we're gonna move or if we're gonna build, we're gonna need to have a longer period of time to do it. There's no way that we can be in compliance no matter what on February 2nd. The expectation, our expectation, and I believe what the city's expectation was that we were gonna have another 9 years to be able to figure out where we were gonna go. That was the, in the meeting, and Barbara Doss, I see the look on your face. You were not in that meeting, but it was a meeting between Adam and Joe Carroll and no longer council person Robin Klein. But it was a discussion that prompted the addition here of the additional 1-year licenses. We were of the anticipation that this would be a long-term thing. We would have plenty of time to be able to go do these things. But then when the council denied that, well, now we're suddenly not having anywhere to go and any way to be in compliance. So these are two ways that we can be in compliance. We will need additional time to make it happen, and we will need additional funding from the city in order to make it happen.
So I think there definitely does need to be a point of clarification though, Dan, in this issue, is that the reason the kennel license was denied was not just because you couldn't come into compliance. And I think that tends to be missed throughout this conversation. This is not a situation where everything was great. You were, the only reason was because the ordinance changed, because just like as you indicated, with the multiple municipalities you've looked at, they have their own requirements in regards to what it takes to run a kennel. And as you've said, everywhere you've looked at, you have to have almost 4 acres in order to be able to do what you want to do as a business owner. So that's part of the reason why when we redid the ordinance in 2020, that was looked at, because we found that what our ordinance originally was not truly compatible for what that business use should have been, as far as how many animals should be in a certain square footage property, everything else. So yes, I agree with you. That's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece that's not being talked about, though, is the amount of nuisance complaints that were brought up during the entire process from your neighbors, from surrounding property owners in regards to noise, in regards to the property owner directly next to you having to put down. I mean, they went on the record during the process of why they had concerns with smells, with the things they had to do with their property, everything else. That's another piece of this puzzle. So that's not fair to make that statement and say, well, everything's going great and it's been. That's not the case. This was the first time where the council heard from direct property owners that there were nuisance issues. So that is something that was taken into this consideration. So this was not just denied because you couldn't meet the requirements. Yes, that's one piece of the puzzle, but the other reason the also council members took into consideration was the complaint violations that were alleged during the planning commission meetings, as well as the council meetings as well. So that needs to be taken into consideration throughout this entire conversation as well.
So Adam, what I will say to that is this is not a courtroom, and as such, hearsay. If we were in a courtroom, they would say hearsay, objection. Anyone can come up here and say anything they want, and it doesn't, like, when it comes to, you know, complaints, they don't have to be valid complaints. They can come up here and complain, and I mean, maybe some people do have complaints, but maybe some of those complaints are bogus too, like the one person who talked about flooding. I mean, this type of issue is usually grandfathered in. We did get a building permit to go build those kennels. It was approved by the city to go build those kennels. And as such, it was part of the plan for this property because it was part of that. It was approved by the city to have the kennels built there. So whether it's, you know, an issue or not, here are two ways that we can go fix it. And that's what I'm asking for, is to be able to go fix it in one of these two ways.
Do you have any questions, Kathy? Any comments?
Dan, I'd like you just to clarify, I believe you did at our last meeting, when the council made the decision to change the ordinance, at the number of animals and the type of business you were running, did that change since then?
Nothing has changed.
You don't have more animals?
We have up to 10 at any time with the boarding dogs. We have the same number of cats. We have not changed what we are doing other than to make sure that no commercial activity is occurring on site.
And that's debatable, but we won't debate that issue. And Adam, I had asked how many animals were licensed on that property, and you had checked with the county clerk, right?
I'd have to go back and look at the last meeting, but yes, we could get you that information of what we
Right.
show in the record as to what in previous years was registered or not.
Because,
for the
because
record,
I believe that there was a jump from 4 to 8 in like 2019 in terms of
Licenses, correct.
So I found the discrepancy that you made. They were not all registered under my name. Some of them are registered under Marissa's name.
Any comments or questions, Jason?
So in terms of a dollar amount, Adam, what would a 6% tax raise be for, you know, a typical resident of city of Platteville?
So part of this issue is because of the proposals, both of the proposals are asking to basically move outside of the city. So there is no additional revenue source that comes in by doing any type of that transaction. So, you know, depending on whatever that potential property is, it's going to have to be some further research. But again, you know, looking at some of the listings, if you're talking $3 million is essentially the loan that has to be for the property. We'll just use that as an example. That's what the city has to give if they were to go to get a bank loan. In the first year alone, it's a 52-cent increase in the taxes in order to cover that cost of the loan. Now, in comparison, for the entire city budget for 2022, it was a 25-cent tax increase. And so that included everything from, you know, employee wages, benefits, contract changes, projects the city's doing. So this one situation alone almost doubles the tax rate. And that's just for 1 year. Then every year, that's assuming too that the tax rate stays flat where it is. Then every year for the 15 years that the city would be paying this off is a, 51-cent increase, 49 to the last year being 36
And that's 51 or 49 per thousand.
per thousand.
So in order to figure out what it would be for your house, you would take the number of thousands. If your house is valued at 200,000, then you would take 200 and multiply it by 52 cents, which would, I believe, is that right?
I mean, essentially what you're looking at is every year roughly, so the first year, to put it this way, you would have principal payment of $200,000. You'd have interest of $94,250.
No, but
So
he's
you're-
trying to figure out how
Right,
much
so-
more he's going to pay on
Right,
his.
so you have to
house.
look at it this way. It's $294,250. So somewhere residents of the city of Platteville's taxes are covering that amount. So you have to take everybody's home. So basically, if you pay, your taxes are $3,000 to the city, you got to start doing the math. So you got to figure out, there's going to be $294,250 of taxpayer dollars that is going to this with no return because it's no longer in the city. So there's no revenue to recoup it. So essentially, you're taking $294,000 of city taxes and it's just gone. It's not going to city services. It's not going to programming. It's not going to projects. It's going to this. And that's the question for the council. And I guess for the city as a whole, everybody who's a taxpayer, that's the decision that you're being asked as council members to make, is that money is what that's going to go to. So essentially you're directing staff that for 15 years, that amount, or as it decreases, obviously, as you're paying off the principal and interest, you're going to be paying less, but that's less taxes that you have to go towards funding the operations of the city.
So that's an increase every year.
It's an increase every year, right?
It's not just like, hey, we're gonna
No,
increase and it's gonna stay here. It's gonna
right,
go up.
because there's no new revenue source coming in to supplement that cost. You have to consider every year that's being hit. That's a hit to the books.
So on a $200,000 house, I'm trying to find my calculator, but if you do a 52 cents, what?
I mean, roughly as an estimate, I believe if you had a close to $300,000 home, again, this is just me doing math in my head, the city portion of the taxes you would pay would be about $3,000 or close to it.
And that would be an increase every year for 15 years. So over 15 years, you would be paying $45,000 in taxes extra than what you're already paying. And when we're looking and when we use the term city of Platteville, the city has to pay for this, the city has to pay for that. I think sometimes we forget that the city is the residents of Platteville paying property taxes. It's not like this money just kind of comes out of air. So essentially what you're saying is that you deserve everyone, all the residents in the city of Platteville that are paying taxes to fund your project.
I am being financially impacted in that amount of real damages. And yes, that is the real damages that I am willing to put 500,000 if I can get bank funding towards that. However, if we cannot come up with a mutually agreeable solution and this does end up going to court, I will not be willing to put $500,000 towards it, and the city taxpayers could end up paying more.
Okay, any questions, Eileen?
No question.
Ken?
Well, some of my questions been answered. One is these locations for the solutions are out of the city of Platteville, and the city manager has said that. I looked at some on the second page, the pictures, Barterville, Potosi, Dodgeville, Mount Horeb. So the basic question to me is, what are the benefits to the city of Platteville as far as jobs created here in the city of Platteville and the taxes received by the city of Platteville? And so it looks like to me that there's no jobs created within the city of Platteville, and no taxes will be received by the city of Platteville. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I find it hard to justify proposals such as these. Thank you.
Okay, Lynn, any questions or comments?
My questions have been jotted around and asked, but I want to I'm just really curious because I'm all for businesses. I really am. I just wonder when you got into the Kindle business and you decided you were already living in Platteville, or did you choose to come to Platteville? Were you already living here when you got your Kindle going?
Well, I was living in Platteville and I purchased this house in 2012
Okay,
with the intentions of having dogs and doing activities similar to this. I specifically found a property that had a fenced-in yard. One thing I forgot to mention, Adam. Yep, go ahead.
okay, because I will forget it even though it's written down. When you started the business, did you started partnering with the city? Is this something that you had already started with? I'm new to the council. I don't know. Was that the idea when you started that this was a city of Platteville kennel?
But it's not co-owned by the city of Platteville or
Okay.
anything of that nature. We did get a building permit when we increased over the 4 dogs. We got a building permit to put the kennels in where they are, and that was all.
I believe that would have been a norm, right? To get a permit to continue to run your business. Okay,
The one thing that Adam had mentioned was finding a property.
I
over-
wasn't finished.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I thought
I'm
you were.
not.
Go
No, I
ahead,
was
go ahead.
telling you why, and help me understand why you feel that the city should pay for your kennel. If we never got into this with you, if this is something that you started on your, plenty of people start businesses, they choose where I have a business myself. Why do you feel justifiably to bring this to the city to pay for millions of dollars for your kennel?
So I purchased the property in good faith, knowing the laws that were as they were. And those laws allowed me to do what I'm doing as I'm doing it. Now, the law changed in 2020. Now, at that point that we are right now, where I'm being told that I cannot continue living where I am, otherwise I'm going to be charged $260. Let's follow that path. If I'm charged $260 a day, every day, eventually I lose my house. My family is on the street. I have nowhere to go at that point. The only thing that I could do is purchase a house outside of Platteville that is outside of the price range that is reasonable for me to do at this time, or build a house that would cost more than I can afford to do at this time. So the city of Platteville has done damage, real damage to me by passing this law and by not allowing for additional years. And those damages do need to be paid, or some other means come up with such that I'm not homeless, because that's not going to work.
So Dan, the other thing that you are not bringing into that conversation again is assuming that everything is working the way it is supposed to. Now, again, there were complaints that were alleged by your neighbors and by surrounding residents of the city. The job of the person who is supposed to go against those complaints, as you indicated, is you as the property owner. Nowhere during this conversation did you bring anything forward that said, okay, this is what was alleged. Here is my evidence, or here's what I'm showing to showcase that that is not true. That was never done throughout any of the process. So again, as council members, just like you said, they have to take the information that is presented at face value. So if it would be a completely different story, if when they were presented with all of this, that there were absolutely no complaints and everybody said this is perfect, then potentially, yes, there would be ways that the council may have granted that. Or they may have said, again, when we looked at the ordinance, it's changed, just as Council Parrott indicated. Anybody who's a business owner, if your business is successful and expands, you outgrow your space. You then, as the business owner, have to make that decision. Either you operate under the confines of wherever you are, whether that changes or not. If the rule changes, you have to make a choice. Either I'm going to comply with the rules that are there in order to operate smaller, or I have to make a decision and move my business somewhere else. What you're asking again is for all of the residents who are the taxpayers to essentially fund your business, which is a problem because those same taxpayers Some of them are the ones that were in front of this council and in front of the planning mission complaining about your business. So the council had to take all that into consideration. So again, to say the only reason it was denied was because of the change, that's not accurate.
Okay, Isaac, do you have any questions or comments that
Yeah,
you want to
couple-
make?
Yeah, a couple of comments. A couple of them have some of them made, but I'll put my spin on it. So I, in no good faith, could I ask anybody in my district or anybody in the city of Platteville to fund any taxpayer money for something that wouldn't ultimately happen outside the city of Platteville and not gain anything in return on. And I think another thing that might be not being brought up here, if I recall this correctly, is I think originally Mr. Winch was granted a private kennel license. And that allowed for him to have so many dogs of his own on his property. And then the ordinance did change. It wasn't changed directly because of you. It was just like many of the other ordinances in town were being brought up to date and updated. So the second point of this is where a lot of this I think came from is when you switched over to, you wanted to run a commercial kennel license. And that's what was denied at that point, because there was a change of business according to what you would, for originally when you got a private to a commercial one. So from there, as Adam has stated, from when the original private one license was granted, you'd state that there were so many dogs, and then you've continuously grown your business, which you've admitted yourself, and again, outdated or outgrown your current space. I'll go with the 4 properties that you brought up here, kind of going back outside the city of Platteville. 3 of those properties have already been sold. But I think it's ironic that you've chosen the 4 most elaborate design and homes that were available for sale in 2 counties. That's besides the point though. So I'll just point out that I'm not in favor of granting any taxpayer funded money towards either of these projects. Or
Okay, I think that this comes back then for action. Is that what we would do? Take formal action or?
I mean, essentially, that's what you should do, yes, is you have a proposal that
Okay.
was presented by the property owner, so
And so we
now,
should really act on the.
in
proposal.
fairness, it should come back as an action item at the
Item.
next agenda meeting, and you guys have the opportunity, obviously, to discuss with your constituents, discuss the concerns, and then come back as formal action to either approve the proposal or move forward with the proposal or deny it.
Okay. And Joe, could you clarify one thing for me? The ordinance was adopted in 2020. So Mr. Winch did get an extension in 2021 on his license. Is that correct?
But when the ordinance was modified, he was allowed to continue under the existing rules for the remainder of 2020. And then it was built in that he could automatically get an additional year beyond that for 2021 without any action by the council. And basically a built-in year and a half to achieve compliance.
To address and comply and come
And
up
then
with
if
a
he
plan.
was unable to do that within that year and a half, he could request a 1-year extension by the council if he showed cause.
If he showed cause, which would mean that he was working toward
Well,
compliance.
that's what the ordinance says. So it'd be up to the council to decide if he showed that. I would interpret that if he showed that he was reasonably trying to achieve compliance and was not able to and needed additional time to do so.
And has Mr. Winch provided any evidence that he's attempting to comply?
I mean, in fairness to Mr. Winch, I would say the one thing he has supplied is obviously, as he indicated, he does have property outside of the city. So that is a step that was taken during the conversations. I know originally when I got here in 2020 was they were actually looking for places outside. I don't believe when I met with you originally, you had that officially kind of cemented yet, but as indicated, I think in what he has proposed, he has land in the town of Smelter. So that's up to the council. If you as the elected body deem that to be sufficient efforts, that, that is one step in the direction of, as he's indicated, his preferred preference would be to go to that location. So, but again, that's up to cause is the, has to be the majority opinion of the elected body.
Okay, then I think we've probably completed any questions or comments on this. And so we'll move on to our next agenda item. Thank you. Okay, the next agenda item then is the senior center van. It's a budget adjustment or budget amendment number 1. Howard, I guess since
I'll get started.
John isn't here, so I
No,
guess.
he's not available.
Okay,
As described here, the senior center is looking to purchase a replacement vehicle and ensure that it's handicapped accessible. They've been doing fundraising for this vehicle and other projects. What they're requesting is that they be allowed to do this purchase with $30,000 from donations and $30,000 from the proceeds of the sale of the former senior center building. The donation fund balance is well in excess of the amount that they're planning on using. And the balance from the proceeds of the former building is above what they're asking for. I've been told that the Commission on Aging also supports the purchase of the van. Because of the supply chain issues that we've been having, our intent is to publish ads, excuse me, this week or next week, prior to the next meeting, so that we can have a bid opening on the 1st of February and see where we can go with all that. If the council denies the purchase, we will send notice to all that the purchase has been denied. And then Nicola would be able to discuss how the budget amendment process needs to work, but this would be a budget amendment to create a new CIP project with those following items. With those items, $30,000 from each.
I don't think we need the mechanics of an amendment at this point in time. Questions on this request?
I have a question about the van that they're proposing to purchase, Howard, but I'm just curious. I know that the meal site, the food is delivered through the.
Okay.
And do they have a separate van for that? Or
I
would
think
this
it's the same
van
one.
be used for that as well? I'm just curious about that.
Or does the county do the meal delivery?
No, I believe it's our folks that
It's our
do
folks right now,
the
yeah.
meal delivery.
We get reimbursed or anything?
I keep reading in their,
I'll have to double check on that.
I keep reading in their monthly report that they deliver like 90 meals average.
Yeah,
And the meals are delivered obviously to the site, my understanding, and then they're delivered by volunteers in.
Seems like
I'm
delivering,
just curious if they.
delivering them with a van would seem to be awfully expensive versus delivering them by car.
That's why I'm curious if they're maintaining two vans with the purchase of this one.
Okay, so I do have a question about this. We have a contract with Enterprise. Is there any reason this vehicle isn't on the Enterprise contract? Is this vehicle to be owned by the city, or is this vehicle to be owned by Peak or whoever, or someone else? No, the Commission on Aging is, I mean, Peak is the not-for-profit. Who's going to own this van?
So I would say that the city would own the van because the funds that are being used to fund the purchase are senior center donations, but those are restricted for use, but the city still manages those funds. And then likewise, when the old senior center was sold, some of those proceeds were set aside. And again, those are restricted for use by council action. However, the city is still managing the use of those funds. And so the purchase of the van would be a city-owned van.
So then that does beg my question of, since, and I mean, unfortunately, I've been on this council long enough to know that we've had more than our share of problems with vehicles that have been purchased for and used by the senior center. Now, I'm not saying that it's their fault. I'm just saying we've had more than our share of problems. So that brought me to wonder if this couldn't be part of our enterprise contract? Don't have a clue.
I think it's
I-
certainly something we could look into.
I had not considered
Yeah.
that, but we can certainly ask and see whether or not that's a possibility.
Okay, and then, so the insurance and all the upkeep on the van then, has that been built into the senior center budget, or is that going to be paid for some other way? I mean, right now, we're talking about the purchase of a vehicle, but we aren't talking about the ongoing maintenance of the vehicle and or the insurance that would be.
Excellent question. So my understanding is this is replacing a existing van. And so however the funding is currently supplied for the insurance and maintenance on the existing van would be how I was assume that we would be funding for the new van.
So is that correct? It's replacing a van?
That's what I was told, yes.
So are they going to apply the proceeds of the sale of the current van to this purchase?
I didn't ask that specifically, but I think, yeah.
Okay, the other question I would have is, I know they did fundraising for this van, and I see that they want to use 30,000 of their 63. Are the 63,730, 56 or whatever it is, since I don't have my glasses, were those all given to purchase a van? I mean, were they designated for the purchase of a van? Because I have concerns about our holding money designated for the purchase of something and then.
Yes, I believe that's true. We can definitely determine that for sure. I did take a look at the accounts when we had this email thread with John and did see that there were donations that were specifically, a number of them for the van purchase that were designated in our accounts.
All right, so those would be my questions. I don't want us to get down a road here
Right.
where people are asking these. So perhaps you can research these questions.
Yes, we
Does
will.
anybody else have questions about, I mean, I don't have a problem with them having a van.
Right. Nope.
I think we have to get it in the best possible way.
Mhm.
Okay, if there are no other questions about the van, then I think we're going to move on to the discussion of some ordinances that are coming up for that we have been working on. The first one is the ordinance from Chapter 5, Health and Property Maintenance. So Joe,
Yes, Chapter 5, it was Chapter 5 Health. We're proposing health and property maintenance. It's another section of the municipal code that we're taking a comprehensive look at, similar to the other sections. This came about for a couple of reasons. One, we realized we had some issues with the ordinance regarding weeds and lawn maintenance. So that was kind of what kickstarted it. So we have several changes regarding that. We increased and modified the listing of noxious weeds. There's actually 2 sections of state statute that have restrictions or certain plants that are considered weeds in there. So we made sure we incorporated those. Then we expanded it to include basically any weeds that were toxic or noxious or somewhat poisonous in either by touch or ingestion. So we included those in there. Then we also made sure we had clarified language regarding the lawn maintenance itself, when it's required, when it's not. Then we modified the section regarding garbage and refuse accumulation of junk vehicles. That was basically just to kind of clean up the language a little bit. A lot of language of property owned by him. So obviously that's a little outdated, updated to reference to state statute. There was a section on swimming pool fences that I felt was out of date. It seemed to me it was pretty obvious that this was written back in the days where you either had a kiddie pool that was a little plastic thing that you could carry around, or an in-ground pool, but nothing in between. Nowadays, you've got a whole lot of options on swimming pools in between. So the requirement for a fence on anything over 12 inches seemed kind of hard on the property owner. And I looked, we also have a section in our building code where we adopt sections of the International Property Maintenance Code, and that has requirements regarding fences. So I propose this language to have the same requirements as that section, so we have some consistency regarding those requirements. Like we always do when we modify our ordinance, we take out any dollar requirements or restrictions as far as violations of the ordinance. And we just place those requirements in, I think it's chapter 1. So it's easier to amend those. And then again, some clearing of the language regarding clear water drainage and a dollar amount from the forfeiture schedule. So that's kind of the very brief summary of those changes. Any questions regarding any of that? And I should mention that staff worked with the planning commission on reviewing this to get some additional input before it came to the council.
Okay, any council member with questions on this particular ordinance? Like Joe said, we worked through this at Plan Commission, Isaac, like in the fall, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's been a while since I've read it, but I do remember this. So any questions from a council member particularly? Kathy?
Joe, does this cover the issue, we were talking about a description natural lawn was? Is this
was
the
one of the
appropriate
issues.
place for that?
Yeah, that was one of the issues that I think the ordinance as it was written was difficult to interpret, or it was open to interpretation and difficult to enforce. So basically we took that language out of there. So it's very clear. I think the way it's written is if you have a weed or a plant that's considered a noxious weed on your property, it has to be destroyed. So the interpretation of is that natural or not, if it meets that requirement, the property owner's got to get rid of it, or we can send some.
And then another question, Office of Weed Commissioner,
Yes.
who gets to do that? Howard. Is that in conjunction with the code enforce? Could that be the same person?
Yes.
Will be the same person?
Yeah, so the code enforcement inspector, I believe is we're now marketing it, is basically the frontline. He or she, or they, will be the person that will be responsible for kind of the frontline work in regards to any complaints or reviews. So what they do is they basically, as we talked about, there was a lot of interpretation in regards to what could be cultivated flowers or what could be a natural lawn. What the planning commission tried to look at was, okay, we need to try to get rid of as much interpretation as possible, because again, unless this person who is doing this is a certified horticulturalist or expert, we need to be able to give them guidance of, okay, where should they go? So the planning commission kind of looked at that, and they basically said there are state statutes that specifically call this out. There's the DNR. So that particular individual who is the code enforcement inspector will utilize that first as kind of their go-to. They'll basically utilize the state statutes. They'll work with the DNR to interpret. Again, now it doesn't talk about natural lawns. It's basically if it is on a state statute list or the DNR has determined that that should not be there, then they need to work with the property owner on making sure that that is not invading people's properties. So that's kind of the intention of on this. Then obviously then Howard as the weed commissioner is kind of the person that they bring that information to, and then he fields any kind of secondary questions or issues. Did I miss anything?
Thank you.
Jason, any questions?
Nope.
Eileen?
Well, just that I would note that in this proposed chapter 5, it says weeds and lawn maintenance, and there is a list of noxious weeds, because I think that's a question people often ask. Well, I don't know if it's a noxious, so you can go to chapter 6 and take a look at the list, and that will help you. Chapter 5, you're right. Thank you, Howard.
Ken, any questions?
Yes, I do. I've been involved with this or looking at it off and on for about 2 years, I'd say. Anyway, my question is, how is Creeping Charlie controlled underneath this ordinance? We have a situation where neighbors are confronted with Creeping Charlie coming onto their property from an adjoining property. And Creeping Charlie is difficult to control. What I've read on it, you have to spray it in the fall after frost, and that does the best killing. So I see nothing here. I couldn't find anything as to how Creeping Charlie can be killed when it's coming into other people's lawns. So how can this be carried out? Now, the city manager, we had a meeting at the location, and so he may have some comment on this, but I don't see any way that the person that is having the problem of Creeping Charlie and allowed it to go into the neighbors is going to be asked to control Creeping Charlie. So that's what I'm looking for in this document. Thank you.
Creeping Charlie is not a weed that's defined.
I
as
know it's not a noxious weed, but it's a very difficult weed to control. So I don't, frankly, even if it isn't noxious, it's difficult. And I've controlled more easily things like Creeping Jenny than Creeping Charlie.
Yeah, so then I would say with that, as the elected body, if, as you kind of indicated, Ken, although that may not be something that is specifically designated as a noxious weed, whether it be in the state statutes or in any of the DNR codes, if that is something that you feel should be combated or destroyed, then you have the ability as the elected body to essentially add that in. That's an option.
Okay, then who's going to pay for removal of Creeping Charlie from property that's been affected by the Creeping Charlie coming from somebody else?
So essentially, if the ordinance is changed or the ordinance is added that Creeping Charlie is considered by the city of Platteville to be a noxious weed, then that is obviously what we enforce on the property. As far as if it expands, that's probably more of a legal question that I'd have to get an opinion on in regards to whose responsibility that is, if that's liability on the property owner, if that's a civil matter, or if that's, because the city didn't enforce it, is that liability? I think those are all things that we'd have to I'd have to get a legal interpretation on that.
Okay, Lynn, questions? Isaac?
No questions. Like you guys on this for the last year, I think it feels like working on this. I do agree with Ken, even though it's not added here. I made the comments in the planning commission as well as about the Creeping Charlie, and like I said, it's about a year-long process of adding, taking away. This was probably times as thick as what it is right now to go through here. So our community looked at the state list. We also looked at lists of Minnesota as well as other areas as well to kind of come to a compromise, and it's fun on it at the planning commission. So.
Okay, Charlie Chamberlain has asked to speak for information purposes only. So Charlie?
Charlie Chamberlain. I live at 410 West Dewey in Platteville. I have for 70 of my 72 years. I've got a problem adjoining my property on some rental. I came here in August and I brought the Schedule 40 here from the state of Wisconsin. And I tried to address that as best as possible. I was cut kind of short and told to sit down. So I didn't get too far with that. But I think we can all agree that this here is put together by horticulturists, land management professionals, and maybe some of you disagree. This is put together by highly educated people. And so I tried to get that introduced, and that's about all I got introduced. I came in August then, and I asked this gentleman sitting over here, this property that's behind mine, that's being referenced, is it a natural lawn or what do we call that? And it's in the minutes that it's called a natural lawn. And I asked, is there a horticulturist, a person of
post graduation on weed or land management, and there is none. So I called multiple people in multiple towns, and I asked them how they address when somebody happens to walk in the door and say, I want to create a natural lawn. And I kind of fell into it with the weed control agent in Cottage Grove. I've got a son-in-law there who's on several boards, Park and Rec board, multiple boards. And he, I called this JJ Larson, and he said it's very simple what they do. Somebody walks in, asks that, they hand this piece of property to them, and then they have an addendum where they grant you a size, height, and what's in that. And sometimes maybe it's simpler, and he said this, that if you read the books, and I've got another one here, which I read into from another university personnel, that if you just say to people, here's your options. You can have annual ryegrass. You can have bent grass. You can have bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, red fescue, tall fescue, and maybe one or two others. That's it. So if you've got anything other than those, it's a weed because it's on this. I know Platteville is fixated with noxious weeds. For whatever reason, I've talked to other people, that's confusing. When there's injurious weeds, there's restrictive weeds, there's invasive weeds. Some of them are, deadly. The city here tried to lower, after this meeting we had in June of 2021, they went over and tried to take weeds that were this high, and which will lead me into some more questions. It'll lead me into that, but and they find a swimming pool in this lot behind my property. Neighbor's pool, plastic one blew in there. They couldn't go in and get that pool. They can't go in and get softballs, baseballs, soccer balls, anything they have fun with. You can't go to the next person's property or you'll be in the hospital. So this is why I kind of got emphasized, I really got going after this. In 19, I got going on it heavy because animals were coming out of there. There's a tree in there at the time, 40 foot long. And great place for raccoons, woodchucks. And like the guys at the country club who I talked to multiple times, once the skunks come in, you've got major problems. And they're next because they had 5 natural lawns out at the golf course. They destroyed 4 because of skunks getting into it. They had the woodchucks, they had the raccoons, they have one left. So I've spent a lot of time doing this, researching this. I want retribution. That's what I'm here for. I want my lawn put back the way my lawn was with grass prior to the city of Platteville calling this weed patch that adjoins my property a natural lawn. Nowhere, and I've had other people look too, nowhere can you find a description of a natural lawn being nothing but dangerous weeds. That's a weed patch. That's a dangerous weed patch. And it's just spreading. It's eating my yard up. I'm paying taxes on the yard now, 15, 20 feet in off this weed patch. That's no good to me. It's nothing but creeping Charlie. And I don't know what the deal is with the creeping Charlie. It's another confusing thing. I had horticulturist come over from UW. And she went through it. And I asked her after she went through it and pointed out all the terrible situations that are here. What is the difference between creeping Charlie and creeping Jenny? Well, she said their goal is the same. They do look a little different, but their goal is the same, to destroy your property. That's what they're doing to me. I asked her about moving that stuff around. She said it gets on your deck when you mow. I'm destroying Mrs. Pennington's property. If she was here, if she was 20 years younger than she is right now, you people would be hearing about it. That's just not right. So she's out in her yard all the time, all summer long, digging up these weeds. Mrs. Beals is paying for it. Anna Banfield, or Lisa Banfield, Anna, who's in Whitaker's property right now. And Bob was erecting a fence. He's got a fence 10 feet down. He's building the fence to hold it. He had to move out of the house because of his wife, her health. She couldn't do the stairs anymore. That's this. We're building fences in my neighborhood because the city says it's a natural lawn. I need evidence. I need someone to show me how that's a natural lawn. So I got some questions, and I got only 5. I'll be brief. I know my time's probably up. Does the city have a natural lawn ordinance? Anybody? Hello. Earth to you.
We
Does
don't
the
have-
city have a natural lawn ordinance? That's a question.
Is that, you ask?
Does the city, we don't have a natural lawn ordinance. Is
You're
that?
calling
That's
that
correct.
patch behind my property natural lawn. Does the city have ordinance on the natural lawn?
As I mentioned, there's reference to old natural lawn in the existing code, and that's why we're changing the code to eliminate that line.
Is that a yes or a no? Does the
Yes.
city have a natural lawn ordinance?
No,
No. So in that case, do they revert back to what all ordinance are? 8 inches. Should that lawn back there, that weed patch, be 8 inches only and only?
If this passes, then
Well, no,
then
no.
yes.
Okay, so right now, what is the answer?
So currently, the way our ordinance is currently written in its current format, there is a section that talks about cultivated flowers and natural lawns. Now, as you indicated, there is nowhere in our ordinance that specifically defines what a natural lawn is. So that interpretation per the ordinance is up to the weed commissioner to determine at this point what a natural lawn is, which is one of the main reasons why this ordinance is being proposed to be changed. Because as we talked about, there's too much ambiguity between, if you have multiple code enforcement officers, as the city has seen, there's been 3 in the last 5 years.
I realize
That's
that.
3 different people that now could interpret it 3 different ways.
No.
As we talked about, could be multiple, you could have multiple city staff doing the same thing. So as we've talked about, that's one of the reasons for this change, is to eliminate to get rid of natural lawns. If this passes, that no longer exists. So now if it is in here right now, the regulations are for lawn maintenance, it's 8 inches. You can't have grass higher than 8 inches. Then on top of that, you cannot have anything in your lawn, period, that is considered a noxious weed by the state statute. So there's no pass to say, well, no, that's a natural lawn, so I don't chemically treat it. Therefore, yeah, there may be nettles, there may be this, there may be that in there, that's gone. By this, that basically says, nope, it doesn't matter if it is a weed of any sort and definition that is noxious per the DNR or per this, it's got to be removed and it's got to be destroyed. Not just you pluck it out. It's basically, it has to be destroyed.
Okay, so we have a natural lawn ordinance, no. So the 8 inches, which I just tried to explain that the weeds in there for the last 3, 4, 5 years have been this tall. They've been illegal, yes or no?
No, Charlie, they have been legal. That's
They've
why
been legal?
that's why we're working to change
They've
the
been-
ordinance.
They haven't
That-
been legal.
I guess they've been legal.
No, they can't be legal. Nothing over 8 inches is legal. That's written up and that's paperwork. I got paperwork that says that you folks, the city says anything, including grass over 8 inches is illegal.
Right. So in the current ordinance says no person shall permit or maintain any growth of weeds, grasses, or lawns over 8 inches in height measured from the ground surface, except those areas designated as follows. And number 3 is a cultivated flowers or gardens or natural lawns.
Okay.
So that's where, yes, by the definition of our current ordinance, if you have a natural lawn, you can exceed 8 inches in height of whatever is in there. Now, the question goes back and forth again about weeds, noxious weeds. Is per our ordinance, there's no definition of natural lawn. So that's up to the interpretation. So if the person interprets that you can have grasses, as you kind of indicated before, there's certain different grasses that will grow more than 8 inches, but are not a noxious weed. So as long as the general consensus is that person, whoever has that lawn, is maintaining it and it's not overgrown or overbearing, then they would be able to have that. The weeds, they should not. Grasses are one thing, weeds are not. As you and I have talked about, they never should have gotten to that.
This is so So these intelligent people that we agreed upon that drew this here up, you've got a smarter guy over there can draw lines on your things and say, well, these are good weeds, these are bad weeds, these are good weeds, these are bad weeds. Is that what you're saying?
Per the way the ordinance currently stands, they could make that interpretation. That is why we are making the change in the ordinance.
Well, that's
Because they
absolute-
shouldn't be able to do that.
So the creeping Charlie, which I had a highly educated woman tell me, does the same damage as the creeping Jenny. You folks say creeping Jenny is just fine, or creeping Charlie is just fine. Creeping Jenny is a no-no. I believe that's underlined, right?
So right now in the
Where
state
does-
statute, creeping Charlie is not considered a noxious weed. That's the state statute. It is considered an invasive weed, I believe, correct?
Yes, yes, that's the whole point, and it's on this list here. So you're saying that these gentlemen sitting over here, or you or whatever, are saying we're smarter, we could do better for your lawn, no matter what's growing behind it, than anybody here with this education. We know better about weeds. No,
Charlie,
am I wrong there?
let me ask, have you read the revised chapter 5?
I really have.
You
And
have.
I've talked to some people, like I
And
say,
so
with
you
advanced.
have seen in definitions 2B, we have a definition. Lawn/turf grass, an area of soil
Turf grass.
covered land near buildings that's primarily planted with a mixture of grasses consisting of Kentucky bluegrass, ryegrass, and fescues, and that is regularly mowed and used for aesthetic and recreational purposes.
Okay, so when you say regularly mowed, didn't you just say that?
I said that.
And when you have weeds this high, how is that regularly mowed?
That, Charlie, we're talking about what we're trying to accomplish, not what we
All
have.
right, I'm talking about the past.
Well,
I'm talking about what you've allowed to happen.
well, and
All
that's
right,
what we're
and so
trying to
because of
correct.
what you've allowed to happen, a huge hunk of my property is destroyed. That gentleman sitting right over there, we went up at least to Banfield's yard, roughly 15 to 20 feet in it, and we took pictures only 2 months ago of nettles 3 feet high. I've sent pictures to code enforcement officers in multiple cities, and they just, you got to be kidding. Is this how Platteville operates? I said, yes, we've gotten people far smarter than anybody that draws a list up for the DNR. Maybe I'm wrong here, but the weeds are this high.
And
and-
I'm not
and I've
denying
heard
that the
you-
weeds were
Do
that high.
you
What
want,
I'm,
here, let me ask one more question
what,
before you
no,
go.
just let me say that we are trying to move from what we currently have.
No,
to a
you
new
don't need to
ordinance.
repeat that. I understand that.
Okay,
All right. All right. But sometimes you got to go to the past to make the future better.
that's fine.
sometimes.
That's what we
All right.
did for 3 months.
So,
6 months.
so when I call code enforcement officers, and I did in 2019, one after another. One girl told me that when she took another job in Madison, and she said, Charlie, I want to tell you before you walk out the door, things have changed. Huh? All right. So I get another code enforcement officer. You know what they do, Barb? You know what they do? They come over, take pictures, fill out paperwork. That's their job. Or else why just, they don't just come over and have a beer with me. They come over and do their job. Where did that go? Where does that paperwork go, those pictures?
I assume they went to staff members that the
Yeah.
code enforcement
Why have,
reported to.
I mean, the.
code
the,
enforcement
the records-
officers do a job, where does it go? Where does the paperwork go?
It gets retained in the files. I'd have to go look to see where those are, whether those are
So,
in my area or whatever, but yeah.
Are you asking what action is taken on them, or are you?
well, why have a
So-
code enforcement? I'm saying to you, why have a code enforcement officer? When what they do, you just throw away. Evidently. I had a police officer come over, the code enforcement officer. What's up? He said, I don't know, it falls under my umbrella somehow. He comes over, walks in my backyard and looks at this, said, oh my God, I didn't know it looked like this. And I said, I've turned it, I had an older person right here, come over and look. And the first thing it said to me is, that's not creepy Jenny, it's creepy Charlie. And I know that conversation's over. That's over. And then I called the code enforcement officer. She gave me this paperwork about how these gentlemen can draw lines under good weeds, bad weeds, good weeds, bad weeds. Well, you're shaking your head like you don't know. You haven't been, I don't know about that.
I don't know about good weeds and bad.
I want retribution. I want you people to decide, you have an obligation. You're not the federal government or the state government, but you're the city. And you're to help the public and private sector. That's your job. I got a yard that's getting ate up, just absolutely ate up. And as far as you're reading that stuff about turf grass, that doesn't stop anything. And nothing's been mowed there in 3 to 4 years, Barb. Nothing has been mowed there in 3 to 4 yards. There is not one stitch of grass in that whole 160 feet by roughly 50 or 60 feet. So there's no codes on height, size, and material. And I got a yard that's stayed up, Mrs. Pennington does, all of us do. All of us that surround that have lost property value because of the city's property, their policy. And I don't care about the future. That doesn't help me. That doesn't help my yard. My yard's been ate up. So what do we do? My tenant shouldn't have to put boots on to go out and hang clothes up. What,
Well, we're looking at changing the ordinance. That's all I can say.
I want retribution. I want my yard taken care of, put back the way it was. And it isn't as if I didn't say something to somebody. They should have paperwork. I had code enforcement officers come. They say, Charlie, we'll come over, we'll take our pictures, we'll do our due diligence with the paperwork, and boom, it goes where? Duh.
And so what I would say, Charlie, is when you and I have had conversations.
Yes.
Now, I went out there.
Yes, you did twice.
Has now. Well, what I want to definitely bring forward is when you brought me that, the situation has definitely improved with that property. As far as it is nowhere near the length of when the first time I came out there and saw it.
You say now there's grass there?
No, that's not what I'm
So it
saying.
hasn't improved whatsoever.
No,
It's
but
just
again,
shorter. It's just shorter.
but it will be enforced because that is the direction that I have given to staff. Now, as you indicated, I can't change the past. I can't because I wasn't here.
I know you can't.
Right.
Right.
So this is one of the steps that the city is taking, or that I took out of seeing this, is we needed to change the ordinance because the ordinance had clear issues with enforcement and with understanding from everybody, from people that felt that it wasn't being enforced, from people that felt they could have a natural lawn. So that's the reason why we're here tonight, is to talk about how we can change it going forward. And whoever the code enforcement officer is going forward, whoever is looking at that, this is the direction that they need to take. Now, in regards to how we handle situations of what occurred in the past, what I can do with that is that's up to the council. If the council wants staff to talk to, whether it's our liability or whether it's, those issues, that's certainly something I can do as the city manager. But that I would ask the common council, how do you want me to proceed with that? You obviously have concerns that have been brought up by Charlie Chamberlain in regards to what have occurred in the past. So what I need to know then as the city manager is, how do you want me to address that? There are certain ways I can do that, whether that's by getting something in writing or putting something together and sending that, or it's just working with Charlie to correct the problem with his properties and bringing that back to the council and explaining what that would be. That's obviously going to be some type of chemical treatment, whatever. Those are conversations and options that you guys have as a council. I guess I would look to that as, the direction I would be looking for is how do you want me to address that?
Okay, so we have two separate.
We've got two separate things going on.
separate
I
items.
think first is obviously
The first
what
is-
needs to be done going forward. So
Yep,
what we've
our-
decided is, in regards to this, there is no longer going to be a natural lawn option in our ordinance. There is clear definition of what is considered grass, what can be, what are the lengths of what can be allowed in somebody's property. And if it is anything that falls in line with the state statutes that is considered a noxious weed, it needs to be removed, period. That then
Sure.
going forward, if this passes, that's then the direction that anybody who is the code enforcement inspector, that's what they're using. So they're looking at 8 inches, it has to be grass. And if it's anything outside of grass, then guess what? It can't be there. And that needs to be enforced. Then the second part of this that Charlie's bringing up tonight is, okay, that's in the future, that will prevent what happened to the property. That doesn't stop what happened. So now it's, What do you want to direct me as the city manager to do in regards to that matter?
And I don't know that we're ready to
Right.
ask that tonight, except that perhaps somebody could bring forward any timeline or documentation or what has been done. I think before you determine what
Yep.
going into the future, you need to have an understanding of. Okay.
Yeah, I certainly can put together a kind of synopsis of everything that's occurred. I've had multiple meetings with Charlie and information of kind of the efforts that obviously he has done as a property owner and been out to his property multiple times and kind of see what's going on. So I can put together kind of a staff note of options and considerations for you to consider in regards to his questions of, kind of retribution.
So the main agenda item tonight is this, the revisions to this chapter. So does anybody have any other questions, comments, or whatever? Because we're going to move this ordinance, repealing an ordinance and recreating an ordinance to action in January so that it can be published, so that people are very well aware when the grass starts to turn green, what the rules are. Anybody with any more to this ordinance? Okay, then we will.
Charlie, can you provide us with information, some of this information that you have gotten from other people?
Sure.
Yep,
Sure, I had some out.
I've got that. Unless you,
Who are on the council wants it?
Sure, I've had, yeah. Barb, I, when you say where I'm at, and that's it where you are. How does it go for almost 4 years and never get mowed? And I repeatedly turn it in, repeatedly. And if it's over 8 inches, how does it get to be my chest height? How does this happen?
Well, that's the report we're going to get from Howard and Adam to see how we got to this point. So I think that Plan Commission and the council is taking action so that we don't have this issue. That's one thing. The other issue then is a recap and a re-look at how we got to that point and what we do about it now.
Because they're all over town. There's I've had people talk, I've had dozens of people come back and look and say, oh my God, how did you get to this? I sent pictures out to this gentleman here and others. Well, you got to tell me, you got to call me and tell me how this comes out. This is it's unconscionable. It's incredible. How does this happen? Where's this high?
Charlie, and everything that has been brought up for tonight, and it's because it's not part of this discussion, is, we've talked about the code enforcement officer, and I've made this comment multiple times. We've been through 4 or 5 of them in the last so many years, and they've been part-times. So everything's been up for discussion is possibly changing that to a full-time position so that one person doesn't leave just after a year or a few months, and then we have another one, and we have another opinion on how something goes. So as I said, it has been brought up because it's kind of a different item, but so the city is looking at one partly because of your issue that you've had here, which we all agree is a bad issue, is changing that to a full-time position so that it can be handled better and in a more positive note than what has happened in the past, or lack of what has happened in the past. So.
Well, I've talked to people from St. James over at the end of Broadway, and they all got problems with it, neighbors, and there's nothing done. And it's just, mine's unfortunately, Barb, I got ideas on how that happened. It got this high, but I won't bring it up now because I think it's unethical. But I'm not going to go there now. I want you people just understand that I've lost a lot of land I'm paying taxes on. I brought it up to the Adam there that I shouldn't have to pay taxes on people. If they don't help me destroy it, they're encouraging it year after year after year, right? I mean, it's one or the other. So I shouldn't have to pay taxes on the city wants to eat up because of whatever.
Okay.
You do
we're
understand.
going to
I
continue
got
on
the
this.
minutes here from
Okay.
the meetings from 15 and 16, and I tried to bring that up at a plan commission meeting too before I got cut off. But at the last meeting, the 4 last words were no changes are made. So that 8 inches is in effect, whatever they say. That 8 inches, no matter what, it's 8 inches. That's a code, and they can't parcel out a piece of property because somebody certain owns it or whatever. And say, well, we're gonna give this area a buy, and no matter what it does to Mrs. Pennington and Mrs. Beals, they're 91 years old. They haven't got time, although Mrs. Pennington's out there a lot. This just isn't right. This isn't right. And those other two girls are trying to save enough money up to get dentures for their kids. Yeah, well, I guess you'd laugh. It's
Did you say they were trying to save money to get dentures for their kids?
Or dent, those things that straighten your teeth out, braces. How's that?
Oh, that's
that better?
That's why
All right, well, you're not confused about anything else I've said. That's a no?
okay. I think
So-
we're
I want-
moving on to the next.
I want retribution. I want my yard put back the way it was before whomever decided to destroy it
And
illegally.
Just for clarification, Adam, you were going to put together options for us in terms of potentially working towards that.
Yes.
That issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And for those who did come over and look at the situation, I duly appreciate it. I really have. Help me out. No more questions.
Okay, we'll move on now to amendments to chapter 22, the zoning ordinance. Joe.
So this is a follow-up on the sidewalk policy that the council adopted previously, just to implement some of those requirements. Two sections in the zoning ordinance regarding design review for commercial and multifamily development projects. It takes the language from the sidewalk policy and puts it into the ordinance, so it clarifies when sidewalks are required and when they're not.
And is the sidewalk map also in here?
That is an attachment, correct? It's supposed to be anyway.
Okay, comments, questions on this ordinance? Again, this is one we worked on a while back at Plan Commission. Eileen, comments or questions?
No, I don't have any questions on this. Obviously, we discussed it at the council before. We discussed it as council before too, and I don't know if the plan commission had anything additional to add, but it
Okay, Jason?
Nope, I was part of the development of that, so.
Okay, Kathy?
I just have a question on, there's a map that shows Platteville sidewalks and is there a legend or something that indicates under priority what tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 is? It's and the
Priority-
same thing. and it-
Priority / tier, whatever you want
Yeah.
to call it. I mean, it.
Yeah,
it's the same.
and then just a question in that same little inset box, sidewalk type, you've got sidewalk, trail, multi-use, proposed trail upgrade and proposed new trail. Is, I guess I'm confused as to why the sidewalks are with the trail. Or is that just for
They're,
comparison?
um,
I mean,
I
is
mean,
it?
the trails are used by pedestrians and bicyclists both. Sidewalks outside of downtown could be used by bicycles, generally not, however. So what we're trying to get at here is something, a sidewalk like you would see on Elm Street or downtown or something like that, whereas something like one of our multi-use trails, for example, the PCA trail, the trail alongside Water Street, was created and is wide enough to support pedestrians and bicyclists. We have, the one that's a potential upgrade. We are looking at doing a TAP grant to potentially pave and light that trail. from the PCA's trail, it's currently gravel from there up through Mountain View Park and up to Fairfield Drive. That's one that's being proposed for an upgrade. We have a couple of trails that are looked at for possibly being new ones. One of them being a connection from the dog park over to where the skate park is to connect with the sidewalk and street system to downtown. Excuse me. And then there's a third one that would go out the old railroad bed behind Napa Novus and connect with the trail on East Side Road.
Okay, I get that. I guess I was just confused as to why, when we're talking about sidewalks for commercial multifamily, why we did a segue to the trails. I mean,
It's that map.
I
is
can
not
understand,
part
I
of-
understand their walkway, but we're looking at making change in an ordinance for sidewalk.
Right, that map is not part of the sidewalk ordinance itself. That was just in for.
Oh, that's
information.
just
It's
in here?
referenced.
Oh, well, okay. Disregard,
Okay.
sorry.
I'm
And this
I'm-
is, and what has it been included is not all of chapter 22. It's just the part of chapter 22 that deals with sidewalk requirements for commercial and multifamily developments. It's not all of chapter 22.
And Kathy,
Or-
for further clarification, the map that's in there is one that is being used and looked at by the community safe routes. So we're looking at like all encompassing safe routes, whether
Okay,
that's a sidewalk or.
That explains it.
Yeah.
I was just trying to figure out,
sorry.
Mhm.
never mind.
Okay.
We're just trying to figure out the connection between the two.
Yeah, and there was one, wasn't one. so
And that's why,
fine.
was it priority 1 and tier 2 or in progress? All right. Any other down here? Isaac, any questions on revisions, to chapter 22?
No.
Lynn?
No.
Ken?
I will look up the main code and read that too, because the tiers, these pictures bother me. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so that's not an action item for tonight. It'll be moved on to an action item for our next meeting, which will be in 2 weeks. Which is, I believe, January 25th. Is that
Yep.
right?
25th.
January 25th. So we will reconvene here on January 25th at 6 PM. I think we're at the end, although I can't get my agenda back up, but I think that was the last item. So I'm only looking then for one more motion tonight.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion by Eileen to adjourn and a second by Ken. Candace?
Parrot,
Yes.
Shanley,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian,
yeah.
Nichols, Cop,
Yes.
Arts.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone.